Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are we getting on? Welcome to a brand new Fallout 76 video. So we've got a little bit of news from the public test server today, particularly focused on melee weapons. And there's a whole lot of buffs here and a couple of nerfs, which I'm sure you guys will want to know about. And it's quite interesting, especially given that melee weapons have been in need of some TLC for quite a while. We've also got a couple of other bits and pieces that I'll get through first, and then we'll dive into all of the rest of that. Caveat before we jump in, of course, this is on the public test server, as is actually exhibited in the notes here. These things can and do change during the course of the test server run. The update for the Gleaming Depths, which is when this stuff will arrive, if it does arrive, is due in December, probably the first Tuesday of December. So if you guys are aiming for the end of the season, anything like that, you might want to keep an eye on that date as being the most likely changeover date. Provisionally speaking, anyway. But yes, all this stuff could change between now and then, is what I'm getting at. So yeah, let's not react overly to it, but definitely something to know about between now and then. So, let's dive in. Inside the Vault, Gleaming Depths Public Test Server Part 2. It's actually surprisingly difficult to say that. So, this is the update that's just come out yesterday, and first on the list, Camp Pets. They're getting a third-person petting animation. There's already been a first-person petting animation in. It's not a particularly good animation, if I'm honest, but it's an animation. Third-person, however, didn't have one at all. Now it does. Great. Obviously, Pets feature will be arriving in December. A couple of changes to caravans here. The L63 laser carbine heat gauge shouldn't get stuck on screen anymore. There's a change to when cryptids will pop up during your caravan runs. They will now only appear, or once this update goes live anyway, they will only appear in large caravan runs, and it will be a chance to encounter them, unless you use cryptid bait from the new vendor at Milepost 0, in which case you've got a guaranteed encounter with some cryptid or another. Players now have a chance of receiving legendary items from all of Collector Murmur's crates. Some of them obviously didn't contain the possibility of having a legendary item. Now they all at least have a chance for it. And the lead-in quest, A Bump in the Road, had a number of issues that popped up in the last couple of updates. So that should be, hopefully, smoothed out in time for the release of the Gleaming Depths. So, combat balancing. This is the really interesting bit behind this patch, and also like 90% of it. So, first up, durability of armor has been increased. Not quite sure why. I think some enemies are putting out a little bit more damage and a few more shots before they go down, so armor's probably wearing out a bit faster. I suspect this doesn't apply to power armor, because if it did, they'd have probably said that. And also, power armor tends to be fairly durable anyway, so it's probably less required. But yeah, just a little additional factor as part of the ongoing massive overhaul that they're doing on balancing to creatures and weapon outputs and so on and so forth across the game, and have been doing for a few months at this point, and a good few months really, and will be continuing to do for a while, probably up until the Ghouls launch next year, so, and possibly even beyond, because that'll probably need some post-launch balancing, as inevitably these things do. So yeah, this is an ongoing process. The chance to learn weapon mods via scrapping, I assume is... Well, I thought this was legendary, actually, but it doesn't say anything about legendary, so I'm assuming it's just ordinary weapon mods. Basically meaning you can get those attachments a little bit quicker when you scrap a weapon. Yeah, nice, okay. Bumping them up on legendaries would be a little bit more desirable, I think. Obviously, that might be somewhere else in the vast mass of patch notes, I don't know, but this is just this particular segment here. The amount of steel and ballistic fiber being dropped by weapon-using enemies has been slightly increased. And some balance adjustments for communists and liberators. Okay, so some adjustments here to loot from item-using creatures, which is enemies that use weapons. In a previous update, they changed it so they wouldn't drop their weapons, or at least not as often, because they're using more powerful versions of them than the player has access to. You know, it is what it is. And it looks like they are kind of tweaking that, so they will drop weapons more often than they have been doing, so that's cool. I'm not entirely sure if that change actually made it to live yet, or if it will be arriving along with this update. But either way, they should be dropping a little bit more frequently than they are on the PTS at the minute anyway. They should be dropping more steel and ballistic fiber, and they should drop steel scrap rather than junk items that contain steel instead, so it's slightly less rubbish, to carry around when you loot these creatures. and less aluminium, bones, copper, gears, leather, screws and springs that can be dropped by them as well. Presumably it was a bit excessive. These are some of these at least are some of the more valuable scrap types out there. Copper in particular springs to mind. So the weapon adjustments. This is the big hot ticket part of the update that has arrived to the PTS today. Yesterday rather. Top of the list is the auto axe, and I'm sure there's going to be a number of people who are not particularly pleased to see this. It is getting a nerf from base damage of 31 down to 24, which is significant. Not huge, but significant. Obviously, it's all subject to some change. The auto axe is by far and away the most effective melee weapon. Outside of the automatic melee weapons, the rest of them are not particularly great. They can be made workable, but it's a lot of work to do that. So definitely pleased to see the rest of these changes, which we'll get to. But the auto axe is getting a nerf, and it is disproportionately powerful as regard it being viewed as quite the ideal boss killing weapon really at the moment. And yeah, it's unbalanced to say the least. So as unpopular as this nerf is likely to be, it's definitely a step in the right direction to bring things more into a reasonable sort of range together. But there we go, a nerf to the auto axe. So the Zweihander that arrived with Skyline Valley is getting a nerf and a buff. I think overall it's probably a nerf, just about, but not quite so much, because the damage split of 85-45 will become 64-64, which I'm guessing is ballistic and energy, I think? So it's getting an energy weapon, energy damage buff, a small one, and a significant dip in its melee, its ballistic damage out. So yeah, probably a net nerf, but still, not the most popular weapon in the game by any stretch, but still, I assume there's a few people who will be needing to know this. So that brings us to the end of the nerfs, because down here we have, as far as I can tell, every single melee weapon with the exception of the automatics, so no rippers, no chainsaws, and so on. But everything else, I think, I may have missed something, seems to be listed here, and you can have a little look for yourself. I'll give you the chance to scroll through and pause that if you would like to. But they're all getting a buff. So it's an extensive list. As I say, pause it if you want to. I'm not going to go through them all. But the general gist of this is, obviously, melee weapons on the whole, not particularly overwhelming in their power output. They're not that great fun to use. And they are getting different buffs depending on the weapon, but they are all going up a little bit. Some of them are actually getting quite large buffs. So if you've ever been thinking, I want to do a melee build, it might be worth having a look at this, because it just got a little bit more viable with hopefully fewer hoops to jump through to make it a practical build. So yeah, that's definitely going to be worth looking into. We've seen in the recent release that the ghoul is, amongst other things I would assume, going to have a number of advantages on the melee combat front. So this rebalance is obviously laying the groundwork for changes that are coming with the ghoul next year. Incidentally, if you haven't seen that, I'll link the video that I did a couple of days ago, as we go through all the stuff we know so far, which is really quite cool in there. But yeah, that's some interesting changes, definitely making the prospect of running a melee build a lot more viable, with the exception, of course, of the excessively high output of one or two weapons at the top there. But yeah, pretty cool, I think. That's a very positive change, along with a couple of... I mean, I know nobody likes nerfs, but to be honest, you do need to have them sometimes, and this is one of those times, so it is what it is. I've got a couple of changes on VATS here. This is more relating to people who have been on the test server, so if that's you, then check this out, because some of the VATS changes they made earlier on, on the PTS specifically, are being rolled back and may not, probably won't be in the update. So the information's there if you want to dive into it. If you haven't been on the PTS, don't worry about it, because it's not happening anyway. So yeah, that's where we're at. Short and sweet. There's some cool stuff in there. Interesting changes. Definitely pleased to see the increased viability of non-standard, shall we say, melee builds, especially a lot of the one-handed weapons, which is cool. That's fun. And there's some really cool two-handed melee weapons out there as well that are going to get some nice buffs as well and have their viability increased too, which is great. I have to admit, I would really like to see changes to the animations and the way melee combat feels, which is a really vague, amorphous comment, I realise. But if you've run particularly like two-handed weapons or any non-automatic melee weapon really, you'll know that there's a lack of nuance and it just doesn't feel that satisfying. And also things to do like hit reg and stuff is still iffy. As much as they've improved it to some degree, there's definitely space for further improvement, and that's the stuff I would also really like to see. But sadly, no mention of that here. But anyway, there we go. Rather than me going around in circles, I will leave that one there. I hope you guys found that useful and informative. Obviously, Bethesda's Discord and Reddit are probably the places to talk about this if you want to get the word out to them on your thoughts and feelings on this. But yeah, definitely thought a few people would want to know about this. I'm quite interested to see how this pans out, especially with the upcoming Ghoul update myself. So, if you did find this useful, please do consider dropping subs and likes and hitting that notification bell. I very much appreciate it. Keep you up to date with what's going on over here. Down below, I've got social media links if you want to check those out, and channel memberships on the blue join button as well. If you want to support the channel that way, that massively helps out, and I very, very, very much appreciate that. And of course, join us for live streams as well. We've got a whole bunch of stuff on the go at the minute. Fallout, we've got the Starfield DLC, and we're checking out the Axis Unseen, which is a nice spooky horror hunting game, which has been really, really good fun the last few days. So do join us for those streams as well. But for now, I'll say a massive thank you very much for watching. I look forward to speaking to you all very, very soon.